Good morning, this is Mrs. Cruz, and today we will be completing our Thursday's reading, where we will finish Chapter 7, answer text-dependent question number 4. Let's go back to what question we're focusing on today. Today we are going to be completely answering the question, what does Mr. Jameson offer to do, and what caution does he remind the Logans of? So if we remember from yesterday, we started answering this question already. So if you scroll down, so he's basically here telling them that he's going to back the credit, and remember that he's backing the credit of all the other people that live around the Logans, the black community, because a lot of them can't get credit since they're sharecroppers, and they're trying to get them to shop somewhere else other than the Wallace store. So Mr. Jameson's saying that he'll back their credit, and he knows that it's a lot of unfair things are happening. So right here he's basically saying that even though he's a Southerner, he doesn't really agree with what's going on, but he does warn them that they need to remember that Harlan Granger is not going to like this. And the reason why he's doing it is because if he's telling the Logan family, don't use your home, because if you use your home, then Harlan Granger is going to take this opportunity to take away your home from you. So we're kind of left off here where he is telling them that they're not going to like what they're doing because they know it's going to be sending a bad message, basically. So I think we should just kind of just start here, just as a reminder. Because he's letting them know, like, why aren't they gonna like it, what you're doing? So let's start right here. But even more important than all that, you're pointing a finger right at the Wallaces with this boycott business. You're not only accusing them of murder, which in this case would be only a minor consideration because the man killed was black, but you're saying they should be punished for it, that they should be punished just as they had killed a white man, and the punishment of a white man for a wrong done to a black man would denote equality. Now that is what Harlan Granger absolutely will not permit. Mr. Jameson was silent, waiting. No one else spoke, and he went on again. So here's where we see like why he's telling them that people would make a big deal. Like, they're not going to make it a big deal because you're trying to make it seem like give them equal punishment that black people receive, and they're not going to be in favor of that. I'm going to go that way. What John Henry Berry and his brother were accused of, making advances to a white woman, goes against the grain of Harlan Granger and most other white folks in this community more than anything else. You know that. Harlan may not believe in the methods of the Wallaces, but he'll definitely support them. Believe me on that. Mr. Jameson picked up his briefcase, ran his fingers through his graying hair, and met Papa's eyes. The sad thing is, you know in the end, you can't beat him or the Wallaces. Papa looked down at the boys and me, awaiting his reply, then nodded slightly as if he agreed. Still, he said, I want these children to know we tried, and what we can't do now, maybe one day they will. I hope that's so, David, murmured Mr. Jameson, going to the door. I truly hope that's so. Okay, so here's his other caution, right? He's basically saying that there's no beating these guys. And what's Papa's response? Maybe that's correct, but my kids need to know at least that I tried. And maybe when they grow up, they'll be able to change things, is his response. Okay, in the days that followed Mr. Jameson's visit, Papa, Mama, and Uncle Hammer went to the houses of those families who were considering shopping in Vicksburg. On the fourth day, Papa and Uncle Hammer again went to Vicksburg, but this time in the wagon with Mr. Morrison. Their journey took 2 days, and when they returned, the wagon was loaded with store-bought goods. What's all that? I asked Papa as he jumped from the wagon. That for us? No, Cassie girl, it's things for folks ordered from Vicksburg. I wanted to ask more questions about the trip, but Papa seemed in a hurry to be off again, and my questions went unanswered until the following day when Mr. Granger arrived. Christopher John and I were drawing water from the well when the silver Packard glided to a smooth stop in the drive, and Mr. Granger stepped out. He stared sour-faced at Uncle Hammer's Packard in the barn, then opened the gate to the front yard and stepped briskly across the lawn to the house. Hastily, Christopher John and I tugged on the well rope, pulled up the water tube, and poured the water into the bucket. Each of us gripping the side of the heavy bucket, we hurried to the back porch where we deposited it, then tiptoed silently through the empty kitchen to the door leading to Mama and Papa's room. Little Man and Stacy, just leaving the room under Mama's orders, allowed the door to remain slightly cracked, and the four of us huddled against it, stepladder fashion. You sure giving folks something to talk about with that carver's hammer, great Mr. Granger said in his folksy dialect as he sat down with a grunt across from Papa. In spite of his college education, he always spoke this way. What they got you doing up north, bootlegging whiskey? He laughed dryly, indicating that the question was meant to be taken lightly, but his eyes tight on Uncle Hammer showed that he intended to have an answer. Uncle Hammer, leaning against the fireplace mantel, did not laugh. Don't need a bootleg, he said sullenly. Up there, I got me a man's job, and they pay me a man's wages for it. Mr. Granger studied Uncle Hammer. Uncle Hammer wore, as he had every day since he had arrived, sharply creased pants, a vest over a snow-white shirt, and shoes that shone like midnight. You right city-fied, ain't you? Course you always did think you was too good to work in the fields like other folks. Nah, that ain't it, said Uncle Hammer. I just ain't never figured 50 cents a day was worth a child's time, let alone a man's wages. Uncle Hammer said nothing else. He didn't need to. Everyone knew that 50 cents was the top price paid to any day laborer, man, woman, or child hired to work in the Granger fields. Mr. Granger ran his tongue around his teeth, making his lips protrude in odd half-circles. Then he turned from Uncle Hammer to Papa. Some folks tell me y'all running a regular traveling store up here. Here till a fellow can get just about anything he wants from up at Tate's and Vicksburg's if he just lets y'all know. Papa met Mr. Granger's eyes, but did not speak. Mr. Granger shook his head. Seems to me you folks are just stirring up something. Y'all got roots in this community. Even got yourselves that loan Paul Edward made from the First National Bank up in Strawberry for that eastern 200 acres. Course now, with times like they are, that mortgage could come due any time. And if it comes due, and y'all ain't got the money to pay for it, y'all could lose this place. Ain't gonna lose it, said Uncle Hammer flatly. Mr. Granger glanced up at Uncle Hammer, then back to Papa. He took a cigar from his pocket, then a knife to cut off the tip. After he had thrown the tip into the fire, he settled back in his chair and lit the cigar while Mama, Papa, Uncle Hammer, and Big Mom waiting for him to get on. Then he said, This is a fine community, got fine folks in it, both white and colored. Whatever's bothering you people, y'all just tell me. We'll get it straightened out without all this big to-do. Uncle Hammer laughed outright. Mr. Granger looked up sharply, but Uncle Hammer eyed him insolently, a smile still on his lips. Mr. Granger, watching him, cautioned sternly, I don't like trouble here. This is a quiet and peaceful place. I aim to see it stays that way. Turning back to Papa, he continued, Whatever problems we have, we can work them out. I ain't gonna hide that I think y'all are making a big mistake, both for the community and for yourselves. Going all the way to Vicksburg to do your shopping? That don't seem very neighborly. Neither does burning, said Uncle Hammer. Mr. Granger puffed deeply on his cigar and did not look at Uncle Hammer. When he spoke again, it was to Big Ma. His voice was harsh, but he made no comment on what Uncle Hammer said. I don't think your Paul Edward would have condoned something like this and risking losing this place. How come you let your boys go do it? Big Ma smoothed the lap of her dress on her hands. They grown, and it's they land. I got no more say in it. Mr. Granger's eyes showed no surprise, but he pursed his lips again and ran his tongue around his teeth. The price of cotton's mighty low, y'all know that, he said finally. Could be that I'll have to charge my people more of their crops next summer just to make ends meet. I'd hate to do it, because if I did, my people wouldn't hardly have enough money to buy winter stores, let alone be able to pay their debts. There was a tense, waiting silence before his glance slid to Papa again. Mr. Joe Higgins up at First Natural told me he couldn't hardly honor a loan to folks who go around stirring up a lot of bad feelings in the community, and especially stirring the colored folks out of their place, interjected Uncle Hammer calmly. Mr. Granger paled, but did not turn to Uncle Hammer. Money's too scarce, he continued, as if he had not heard, and folks like that are a poor risk. You ready to lose your land, David, because of this thing? Okay, so let's pause real quick to think about what he's saying. So he's basically telling them that he doesn't like what they're doing because in his eyes, their community is very peaceful. And if they are doing this, then it's going to ruin the peace that they have. And then he's also telling them, like, that if they go on to do this, that he is going to basically charge his people more of their crops. So he's basically going to charge them more, the sharecroppers more, which in turn means that they're not going to have money left to go shopping anywhere, is basically his goal. So let's see what happens. Papa was lighting his pipe. He did not look up until the flame had caught in the tobacco and held there. Then he turned to Mr. Granger. 200 acres of this place been Logan land for almost 50 years now. The other 200 for 15. We've been through bad times and good times, but we ain't never lost none of it. Ain't gonna start now. Mr. Granger said quietly, "It was Granger land before it was Logan." "Slave land," said Papa. Mr. Granger nodded. "Wouldn't have lost the section if it hadn't been stolen by your Yankee carpetbaggers after the war, but y'all keep on playing Santa Claus, and I'm gonna get it back real easy. I want you to know that I plan to do whatever I need to keep the peace down here." Papa took the pipe from his mouth and stared into the fire. When he faced Mr. Granger again, his voice was very quiet, very distinct, very sure. "You being white, you can just about plan on anything you want. But I tell you this one thing. You plan on getting this land? You're planning on the wrong thing." Mama's hands crossed almost unseen to Papa's arms. Mr. Granger looked up slyly. "There's lots of ways of stopping you, David." Papa impaled Mr. Granger with an icy stare. "Then you'd better make them good," he said. Mr. Granger stood to go, a smile creeping smugly over his lips, as if he knew a secret but refused to tell. He glanced at Uncle Hammer, then turned and left, leaving the silence behind him. Okay, so there we go. From here, we can pick which one we want for our quote, or number 4. Let's see. I'm going to choose okay, so I'm going to choose this one because it's basically saying Mr. Jameson knows the consequences that he's going to face, but he asks them, like, do you know the consequences you're going to face? Because this guy is not going to just let you, this is page 20, this guy is not just going to let you do this without any consequences. So this means, okay, so this is basically saying that Mr. Jameson is willing to take the risk and is willing to back people's credit, right? So this shows that he is taking it very seriously, I think, and he wants to remind the Logans that there's going to be serious consequences to pay since people are going to be really upset. Something like that. All right, and basically that concludes our reading. So we did it in under 15 minutes today. That's a pretty big accomplishment. Thank you guys for those of you who are following the videos, and I'm going to work on being less sleepy because, as you guys know, it's harder and harder to wake up in the morning. So my morning routines are actually to read these with you. So thank you for following along with me.